All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Rise Zion. Today we have Brian back with us in, not in the studio, we don't have a studio, but he is with us here, and he would like to tell us a little bit about his museum. It's a museum that he recently started, and you might not have heard of it yet because it's, as far as I can tell, it's brand new, and it's called the Martyrdom Stories Museum. It's located, and you said in a different episode, it was located right next to the expositor. Is that correct?
That is right.
Awesome. And he has a story that he's going to tell us too. So stick around for that. It's not just about telling us about his museum. It's a story. So,
Seth, it's great to be back with you, Brian Stutzman. I live most of the time in Idaho Falls, and we've talked about evidences of Joseph Smith's prophetic call, the Book of Mormon, a couple episodes about his prophecies. And I got really interested in Nauvoo years ago, and I just felt that spirit of the restoration there. There's what they call the spirit of place. When you go to different places, whether it's the Sacred Grove, Nauvoo really hit me when I was young, and I knew that I had a spiritual connection there. And as I started doing research 10 years ago on Warsaw, this little town 18 miles south of Nauvoo that nobody's heard of, I wrote the history of Warsaw, started doing lectures there. They were very nice people. It's where the mob came from that murdered Joseph Smith. There were some members there. I'm going to tell you the story of Eliza Graham, who lived there. I just felt tied to Hancock County. And so a couple of years ago, we got to a point in our my professional life that I could work from anywhere. COVID taught us that we could Zoom call and we can text and we can take care of business over email.
Yeah.
Some of our companies allowed me to do that. We started spending some time. I was serving as a YSA bishop. And so we would have breaks in school. And so we'd get out the calendar and decide whether we were going to go someplace warm and work or go to Hancock County. And so over a year ago, my patient and supportive spouse, can't say enough, agreed with this harebrained idea to start a museum. See, we joke, Nauvoo doesn't have enough historical sites. So we had to go out there and make our own.
Another one. Yeah.
In reality, Nauvoo is loaded with historical sites in reality. And we're kind of the crazy people out there. Here's what happens. You go to Carthage and there's 8 buses and a couple thousand people, and everybody wants to spend time in the Carthage Jail. And these good, well-meaning missionaries have to cycle people through because there's people outside wanting to get in. Thousands sometimes a day.
Right.
Well, we wanted an opportunity to delve deeper into this martyrdom, what led up to the conflicts, what happened during the martyrdom, what happened afterwards, and the trial that happened. And so we wanted to tell these stories. So we started looking for properties. And God opened the way that we were able to purchase a building that ended up being immediately through the wall of where the Nauvoo Expositor newspaper building used to stand. Now, the Expositor was torn down and there was a building built over the top. The building we bought was built in 1913. It's right across from the Hotel Nauvoo, 1 block from the temple. And we went out there lots of times and hired the best people in Hancock County, carpenters, HVAC people, plumbers, flooring people, and managed some remotely, was able to be there in person. And August 1, we were out there during a break from school, from our church callings, and it was ready to go. And we opened it for 8 days, a soft opening, just a couple of days ago. And so the reason I tell people is that we want to invite everybody out there. We're going to be open from most summers from about Memorial Day, which is the end of May, through the end of the pageant, which is about the first, second week of August. And it's no charge. We're self-funding this. I had a few friends give me what amounted to be about 2 or 3% of what we have into it. So I'm grateful for their financial contributions of just a couple friends, but we're self-funded the purchase, the renovation, and the ongoing expenses, the utilities, whatever. And then we run it ourselves when we're
Awesome.
there. So it's free. It's a block from the temple. And we think we're telling some important stories. Our first day we opened, you got to remember, Nauvoo is a town of 900 people, 9 months a year. It's a very small town in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful setting, got some of the neatest people that we've ever met in Hancock County. And so we're opened. We put our sign out. People come in. They read the stories. We have a few artifacts, but we're more story driven than artifact driven. There's lots of places you can go see artifacts, but we want to tell some stories that weren't talked about. I'd like to just maybe share this brief story with you, if it's okay, about
Absolutely, yeah.
Eliza Graham. So Eliza Graham became my hero as I started writing the history of Warsaw. And I read about her and learned about her and started doing research, met up with her descendants. They came to my home. Eliza Graham is probably, and I wrote an article, and you can Google my name and Eliza Graham and find it a couple of places. She's probably the bravest woman in church history that you've never heard of. See, we hear about like Eliza Snow and some of these others.
That's a more familiar Eliza. Eliza Snow, yeah.
People need to know about Eliza Graham. She is my personal hero. And we have several spaces in the museum dedicated to Eliza Graham. So what happened was, I'll try to condense this, the day of the martyrdom, some military regiments, we call them mobs, assembled in Warsaw, 2 from Warsaw, 1 from nearby Green Plains, led by Colonel Levi Williams. Thomas Sharp was one of the leaders. He was a newspaper publisher, the Warsaw Signal. And they thought the governor had been kidnapped in Nauvoo. They heard he was up there. So they went originally to a place called Golden's Point, and they got word that the governor was okay. And the governor told them to go back to Warsaw. Well, they heard that Joseph was in Carthage Jail. In fact, Frank Worrell wrote a note to the mob, said, now's the time to do the deed. Frank Worrell was a guard, a Carthage Gray at the Carthage Jail. This is Thursday, June 27th, 1844. And so they had a big debate at Golden's Point, this militia. The governor says, go home. Frank Worrell says, come to Carthage and finish, now's the time to do the deed, which we do. And a group went back to Warsaw and a group went on to Carthage. We know the story. They took mud, covered their face with gunpowder and mud, charged the jail. Joseph Smith, they shot at, and he jumped out of the window, very much alive, yelling, "Oh Lord, my God!" And the mob killed Joseph Smith outside by the well, lined him up, firing squad. Okay. Well, they came back to Warsaw that night. Well, as soon as that happened, a cannon was shot. Everybody around knew what was happening. Somebody yelled, "The Mormons are coming!" And like the crowd, the mob just kind of scattered, and a lot of them went back to Warsaw. And it took them a little while to get there, and Thomas Sharp came in, and they had a meeting place. Most towns had a main hotel. In Carthage, it was called the Hamilton House. In Nauvoo, we had a Nauvoo House. It was just beginning to be built. But in Warsaw, they had the Warsaw House, or what was called the Fleming Tavern. And the Warsaw House, it was destroyed in 1899, and a house was built over the top of it in 1904, but by William Pydrant. But the house there, the mob came back to. Well, the proprietor of the house was Samuel Fleming and his wife. Sam was in Boston at the time, but his wife, Anne, they had a restaurant, they had a livery for the horses, and they had a hotel. and Jacob Davies and others lived upstairs in the hotel. They came back to the Warsaw House for a meal and to brag about what they'd just done in Carthage. Well, Anne was working in the kitchen, and her niece, and they weren't Mormons, her niece, Eliza Graham, was a member of the church. She was 18 years old, and she was a waitress on duty that night. And the mob came in June 27th, 1844, the day of the martyrdom, and wanted to eat. And they started bragging about what they had done. Now, nobody knew in Warsaw what had happened yet. They didn't have texting calls or whatever. And so Twitter, Instagram, whatever. So the mob comes in and starts bragging about killing Joseph Smith. And on duty was 18-year-old Eliza Graham. And she starts serving. Imagine if you were serving a group of people and they were bragging about killing the prophet of the church.
Well, that would be horrible.
And the first presidential candidate assassinated, and the mayor of Nauvoo, and all these titles that Joe Smith had. She had to be in complete shock. 18 years old. She gathered herself. She served the mob that night. She memorized who said where, what they said, and how they said it. She immediately left for Nauvoo the next day or two, went up with her parents. Well, Governor Ford promised to have a trial. And certainly the next year, spring of 1845, there was a trial in Carthage. And it's quite a story, but the leaders of the church discouraged anybody from going and testifying. Why? They wouldn't be safe. Joseph and Hiram weren't safe in Carthage. What makes you think Brigham Young, John Taylor, Willard Richards would be safe?
Right.
Somehow, Hosea Lambert, the prosecutor, convinced Eliza Graham to come and testify. She was a star witness for the prosecution. And she testified, now 19, in this hostile environment in this courthouse. They had dismissed the properly seated jury, called random people out of the audience to be in the jury, who were friends and family and associates of the mob. They come to see their friends get off.
Right.
The Judge Young allowed the prosecutors to pick 12 random people from the audience to be the jury for this case. Unheard of. Eliza comes in and she testifies against the mob. The 5 that were standing there was 9 originally charged, 4 disappeared. Joseph, of course, shot 3 shots down the stairway trying to defend himself. Still a martyr. You can still defend yourself and be a martyr for the cause.
Yeah.
4 people disappeared. 3 of them had wounds that would have placed them in the hallway of the Carthage Jail. 5 people showed up. They could have been hung if found guilty. Eliza testifies in this hostile courtroom. Later court observers wrote that this brave girl, she testified who said where, what they said, and how they said it. And John Hay, wrote the most famous non-Mormon account. She says, Eliza remembered everything perfectly. Unfortunately, she remembered too much. And they discounted her testimony as they would, and they did. They let the 5 go free. Her aunt Anne testified against the prosecution. She testified for the defense. I was there. I didn't see anybody. So imagine now Eliza comes over with the saints into Salt Lake, and eventually dies in childbirth just south of Evanston, Wyoming, in the 1850s, 1860s. And her ancestors or her descendants are in the church. In fact, one of them is planning a family reunion on our opening weekend in Nauvoo this summer in 2025 in May, the end of May, as a tribute to Eliza, the bravest woman in church history you've never heard of. Could you imagine how much courage it takes to testify against the murderers? Those who confessed. William Grover said it was his gun. Jacob Davies said, no, it was my gun. They confessed to killing the prophet Joseph Smith, and the next year, at 19 years old, without any support, you're testifying in a court of law against them, where the whole nation is watching.
Yeah.
And you could be killed for being there.
Yeah, you probably, as a 19-year-old, have nowhere to run to either. So
that's one of my favorite stories we tell at our Martyrdom Stories Museum. We invite anybody who comes to Nauvoo, especially during the summer, to drop in, no charge, come hear these stories and more. And if you go to our website, you can contact us. I can let you in remotely if you're there another part of the year.
Wow. That is a fantastic story. I think it's so important to tell these stories that most people haven't heard. I can only imagine that Eliza probably appreciates what you're doing on the other side of the veil, trying to tell her story and of her bravery. And it's probably only because of her that we have, these important accounts. I know that you have been quite active online, trying to put down some of these horrible rumors about some of the early leaders of the church actually conspiring to murder Joseph Smith. However, the evidence to the contrary is quite strong, probably because of the combined efforts of the early saints who recorded these things diligently. And I also think it's remarkable, not only that, but I mean, the church was so diligent in keeping its records that we started keeping our own history before the United States started its own history. So
when you say contrary to the critics, Joseph Smith was killed by a mob, not an inside job.
Right.
And there's so much evidence for that, and people can have faith in the history as we tell it. There's different ways. I mean that's a broad statement. Maybe I should have clarified that. 10 people can watch this podcast, write in their journals what they experienced. And somebody 100 years later could read all 10 and say, oh, there must have been 10 podcasts on this topic.
Right. But in reality, it's the same event. They're just remembering it a little differently. Which is evidence that it actually happened. Because if they were identical, they would say, well, it's probably fraudulent. Right.
So anyway, thank you for having me on your show. Would love to have your people who watch this episode, or people who know people who are taking family vacations out to see the sites. I used to tell people, our ward members I was working with young single adults, and I said, as you decide to go, when you get engaged and you plan a honeymoon, you can go to Disneyland, or you can go on a cruise, or for about the same amount of money, you can go on a fantastic church history tours, including Palmyra, Kirtland,
and see all of it,
and ending in Nauvoo. And there is power in place when you go to places. Just another brick in the testimony of feeling you can't go to the Sacred Grove without seeing this remarkable place, and you can't go to Carthage without seeing this remarkable place. One of my other favorite places is the John Johnson Farm in Hiram, Ohio, where the Doctrine and Covenants Section 76 was given. You can't go to some of these places and not just have your eyes open, and sometimes the Spirit will hit you over the head with a big sledgehammer, you just unexpectedly. And that's why I'm a big proponent of these historical places where we can see the hand of God, hand of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ firsthand. And we have a unique opportunity, far better than going to Disneyland, in my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Brian, and Eliza's story as well. So for all of you out there who are watching, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you feel like it, please make sure to check out Brian's new museum. All right. Thank you so much.
It's free.
Yeah, it's free.
You don't like it, we'll give you your money back.
Which is nothing. All right. Thank you so much. And until next time, bye.
Thank you, Seth.
You bet.